Hello, I'm Annie Davey. I've been telling Bible stories to children for many years, and I've got some lovely ones to tell you from the New Testament in this section here. If you want to know about the background, where I got some of the background detail from, you can look it up on the web truthortradition.com or www.korky.info, where we've written a book called Jesus, Faith and Fact. So it's all in there somewhere, but there's some interesting things here which you may not know. You may think you do know the stories, but wait and see. So let's see what we've got. Hello, can you wriggle your fingers and move your shoulders and turn your head? We can move all over, can't we? Isn't it great? What do you call somebody who can't move at all? Can you remember? Begins with a P. If you can't move at all, you're called paralysed. And the story today is about a young man who was paralysed. And in those days, there weren't any sort of gadgets or electronic equipment to help them. Nowadays, there's all sorts of wonderful things. Even eye movements can be made to work a computer. But did they have computers in Jesus' day? No, they didn't. They hadn't been invented then. In fact, there hadn't been much invented at all that was technology that we have today. So if you were paralysed, you were completely stuck. You had to lie flat on your bed in your house and be looked after. And that was all there was. So it was rather a lonely, rather boring sort of life, I think. And the story today is about a time when this person here came to town and people got very excited. I bet you can guess who it was. Should we read the white letters together? It was Jesus. And people came from far and wide. All the local surrounding towns sent somebody along, usually the important rabbi, the big teacher, the very important man from the village. They wanted to see Jesus, see what he was like, see if what they had heard was really true. Because they'd heard amazing stories about he could teach people about God in a way that made them understand things, and he could heal people, and they wanted to see for themselves. So we'll pretend we can see in this house here, shall we? We've got lots of people in the house. Let's have a look. Try painting with 3 brushes at once, shall I? So there's some sitting down in the corners. There's some more standing up behind them. Lots of people. Better give them some heads. And in the middle of them, let's put Jesus, shall we, where we can see him there. So it was all quite exciting, but the house was packed with people. Now, in the other house, the other side of town, was this paralysed man. We don't know if he was a man or a boy. I think he was a young man. And he was just lying there, and there was a knock on the door. And so he jumped up and went to the door to answer it. Did he? No, he couldn't. Couldn't move a muscle. So he probably yelled out, "Mum, there's somebody at the door." She said, "Yes, all right, dear, I heard it. I'm just going, just a minute." So when she opened the door, there were 4 young men there, friends. And they said, "Can we come in? Can we come in?" It's really exciting because Jesus has come to town and he's going to be teaching. And she said, "Well, come in." "Yes, yeah, come in." So they went and they stood round the young man's bedding mat with him lying on it. And they said, "Guess what? Jesus is coming to town. Isn't it exciting?" And they said, "Well, fat lot of that good that's going to do me. I can't even move." And they thought, that is a problem. What are we going to do? "Oh, well, there's 4 of us. There's 4 corners to your bedding mat. We'll take you." "Yes, you can't do that. You can't carry me through the street." "Yes, we can. We can. Because if you make up your mind to do something, you'll jolly well do it, won't you? You'll manage it somehow." So each of them picked up a corner of his mat. Heave-ho, up we come. "Oh my goodness, what did you have for breakfast this morning?" And they set off, carrying his bedding mat very carefully, all through the streets, till they got to the house where Jesus was. But oh dear, when they got there, they had to put the bedding mat down on the ground because not only was the house full of people, but everybody else was crowding round outside the house. So outside the house you had even more people. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And they thought, oh no, we're never going to get him to see Jesus at this rate. Mums and dads and boys and girls, grannies and grandpas, aunties and uncles, everybody was there. Everybody stopped what they were doing because they heard that Jesus was in town. And they came, hoping perhaps they would see Jesus when he came out. And the four friends thought, well, what are we going to do? We never get through that throng of people. And then they noticed, of course, the stairs on the outside of those houses were up on the outside. They thought, well, perhaps if we take him up on the roof and we can roll him over a bit so he can hear, perhaps he might put his ear to the roof and he might hear through the ceiling. Of course, that wasn't much good. They carried him carefully up the steps. Very difficult carrying somebody on a stretcher sort of thing up the bed, up the stairs. But they did it. And they thought, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just take a tile or two off. Just make a little hole, maybe, oh my goodness, before you knew what had happened, a great big hole had appeared in the ceiling just above where Jesus was, and four rather worried faces were looking down it, thinking, oh my goodness, now what have we done? We're going to get into awful trouble for this. There they were looking down into the hole, and they thought, right, in for a penny, in for a pound, come on then. They picked up the corner of the mat, tied it to some ropes, and lowered him down inside to where Jesus was standing. And everybody put up their arms to catch him. They were very surprised. You can imagine bits of plaster falling off the roof and then somebody else appearing through the middle of it. And down he came on his bedding mat. And I should think he was very, very scared and uncomfortable. Nothing he could do about it. He couldn't move. I should think he really wanted the floor to open up and swallow him up, because the last thing he wanted to be lowered down through somebody's roof in front of Jesus. Oh, my goodness, he felt dreadful. And he was very worried about what people would say. I mean, the person who owned the house must be angry. And he thought Jesus would be really cross because he interrupted what he was saying. And then Jesus looked at him and he called him this here. He said, friend. Well, if you're going to be cross with somebody, you don't usually start by calling them friend, do you? And so he felt a little bit better. And then Jesus said something extraordinary. He said to him, all the wrong things that you've been thinking and saying and doing, all those wrong things, they're called sin in the Bible. You're forgiven those. And the young man felt this lovely feeling of peace go through him. He just was so thrilled that all the nasty things he'd been thinking and saying, and maybe had been doing before he became paralysed, I don't know, but that was all wiped clean. And I remember when I decided to follow Jesus, I had to get up out of my seat and go to the front of the meeting to show that I really meant it, that I wanted to follow him. And somebody prayed for me then, and that feeling of release and peace and freedom was absolutely lovely. And I stayed on a high for about 3 days. It didn't last that long, I must admit, but that was a long time ago, 60 years ago now. And I've never forgotten it. And so that's why I think that's what happened to this young man, this lovely feeling of peace going through him. But the important elders and people who come from the local towns in the house to listen to Jesus said, who does he think he is? So the important people in the room were very cross with Jesus. They said, nobody but God can forgive sins. Nobody but God has the right to do that. He hasn't got the power to do that. And Jesus said, well, to show you that I do have the power to forgive sins, I'll show you this. And he said to the young man, pick up your bed and walk. How was he going to do that? And Jesus took him by the hand, and as he took him by the hand, he felt this wonderful glow, tingling feeling go right through his body. Oh, wow, it feels amazing. I think that's what he felt, because once I had my shoulders were so stiff I could hardly move them, and somebody prayed for me, and that lovely warm glow went through my shoulders and I could move. And he just knew, holding Jesus' hand, that he could get up. So gradually he sat up and looked around him and looked amazed, and everybody was watching with their mouths open to see what would happen. And then I think he hung on to Jesus and he stood up. And this is somebody who hadn't stood up for years, if ever. And he lifted one foot off the ground and then the other foot. And his friends up here were nearly falling through the roof with excitement to see him on his feet and lifting his feet. It was incredible. And he must have looked at Jesus and said, oh, thank you. Look. And everybody in the room said, well, we've never seen anything like that. This is remarkable. And so he went out of the house, and I should think he was hopping and skipping and jumping and running. And when he went home and knocked on the door, and he heard his mum call from inside, all right, I'm coming. And imagine when she opened the door, and there he was smiling at her on his feet with his bedding roll under his arm. Oh my goodness, what an amazing story. And of course the disciples never forgot it, because they've written it down in Matthew and Mark and Luke. All three of them wrote down that story about the paralysed man and how he came to be healed and so thrilled and have all his sins forgiven. And so they never forgot that story. Because let's see what this word here says, shall we? It says that he was forgiven. All that nastiness inside him had gone. He had a fresh start. And he was completely free. So I imagine that he was dancing all the way home. And I should think his 4 friends were dancing with him if they could catch him up. It was so exciting. I think it's one of my favourite stories. And that's something that we can always remember, that when things seem to be tying us up and we feel in an awful fix, that if we talk to Jesus about it, he makes such a difference. He'll forgive us all the wrong things, especially if we're sorry, well, only if we're really sorry about them. And he'll set us free to have a new sort of life, a life where we can do amazing things, because that's just the kind of person that he is. So let's think of somebody that you know who needs some help, shall we? We can all be like one of those 4 friends who did what they could to help their friend who was really stuck. There's always something we can do, even if it's just lifting the corner of a stretcher. So dear Lord, thank you so much for this story. And we're thinking now of somebody that we know who's very poorly or very sad or who needs some help in some way. Please, Lord, show us how to help them if we can. And if we can't, help us to remind them that you love them very much and that you will be close to them and that you will help them somehow. And we ask this in his name. Amen. God bless you.